Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at another devlog for the next major update, and this time we're having a look at the Object 775. This is one of the poster boys of the update, mainly because of just its weird and wackiness, I suppose is probably the way to put it. It mixes a lot of odd ideas together, which I think will interest people a lot and hopefully will at least create some kind of like different gameplay for many. But at least for me, it still has a few factors that I'm unsure about on how it will actually fit in the meta. It's going to be for the USSR, it's going to be in the standard tech tree, and also a rank 6. So let's get into the history of this vehicle. In the early 1960s, the USSR began to develop a promising medium tank with guided missile weapons. Engineers from the Chelyabinsk tractor plant presented two prototypes for testing of the Object 775 tank, featuring the Rubin anti-tank guided missile, which were launched from the barrel of the tank. In 1968, the project was closed due to the concentration of efforts on the Object 434 tank project, which became the T-64A. The only surviving Object 775 is on display at the Patriot Park in Kubinka, near Moscow. So the 775 coming in will bring something which is pretty interesting to War Thunder. A vehicle which is so low and has incredibly small visibility, I feel like a lot of people are just going to miss it around the battlefield as it moves around. It does actually have like some really interesting parts to it though. So the vehicle does have access to quite a decent amount of armor, even though it is quite low to the ground. The only areas which are not really filled with armor are the lower glacis, which you'll hardly ever see, and then also the cannon breech, which you'll probably see all the time, especially when it's firing. The actual downside of this vehicle, which usually isn't the case with ATGM launchers, is its ATGM itself. The vehicle has this ATGM which pens up to 500mm, which sounds great, but it doesn't have a tandem warhead, and also it gets affected by all of the standard systems that some of the vehicles have. Stuff like the Brennus, for example, would be able to stop the tracking of this missile, which is kind of interesting because we haven't really had any ATGMs around this BR which are actually affected by stuff like the Dazzlers and things like that. So basically, what you have from this vehicle is a pretty decent, maneuverable vehicle. It's able to motor with quite a large engine. It's also able to fire on the move with the ATGM, and because of the armor profile, it's going to be quite tanky from the front. But it's just let down by the ATGM. The ATGM itself is, a decent speed. It's also, at the same time, got good pen. It's just the fact that whenever composite or chemical protection is involved, which it's going to run into a lot of vehicles of this BR, which at least has some of that, it's going to have some weird times where it isn't able to penetrate. One of the things that's pretty cool about the vehicle, though, is the reload. It does have an automatic loading system, mainly because it only has 2 crew members. So the vehicle has only 2 guys in it, and one being, of course, the driver, and then the other one being the commander gunner. The loading system is a cylindrical one in the center of the vehicle, and this means it actually has a reload of 6 seconds for multiple ATGMs in a row. So if you screw up a shot, then you can just kind of fire another one. There's a lot of ATGM carriers out there which their reloads are much longer than standard cannon reloads, so that means that if you screw up a shot or screw up a missile, you're going to kind of be boned and you're just going to get hit twice by the enemy, where with this thing, because of its quicker reload, it's going to be much easier to either finish off an enemy or continue to, do damage to others. It has a lot of potential for being quite a strong vehicle, but also, as usual, has the same downsides a lot of other ATGM carriers have. You always have to keep looking at the target while the missile is going in, something that many vehicles at this BR don't have to do with their APF SDS rounds, such as the T-64A. This vehicle is at the same BR as the T-64A, and the main thing it gets over it is, of course, the hydro-pneumatic suspension. That's such a tough word to say. And then also, of course, it's very, very low profile because of it. and that's great and all, but with the T-64A, I get the 3BM22, I get even additional armor, and basically the same mobility, and I can fire on the move, and I have the autoloader as well. So I feel like even though the 775 has quite a lot of redeeming factors, I don't think it stays at the BR of 9.3 that it's sat at. I'm pretty sure it's going to follow the great tradition of most ATGM carriers and be woefully over BR'd and then get down BR'd pretty efficiently. Once people realize that this is just a standard Soviet vehicle, and where do you shoot standard Soviet vehicles? Well, you shoot them in the center. I don't think it will be any surprise that people will just do that, and they'll just shoot through the breach and destroy everything, in it. What's going to be more interesting to me is how people use this on separate maps. The fact that it already has kind of a lineup around it means that it can be one of those vehicles that doesn't necessarily have to be good on every map. It can just be a situational vehicle which works in certain areas and not others, where you have stuff like the T-64, the T-72, stuff like that, which can, do the bog standard average rolls if you are on, most maps. There'll be certain areas or certain specific maps where this thing will be very powerful with its ability to use its hydropneumatic suspension, with its ability to stay low, fire the missile, and then move back. One of the criminal things of this, though, just like a lot of Soviet vehicles, is it can hardly reverse. So once it's in battle, it won't be able to get out. One of the things that actually helps a lot of stuff like the AFT-09, for example, is not just the fact that you can keep the hull kind of away from the battle. It's also you can go forward and go backwards at a decent rate, so it's much easier to move around with it. And that is super useful for the vehicle itself. For the 775, that's just not possible. I will say, when it comes to ATGM carriers, the USSR does have some of the better ones. Stuff like the IT-1, even after the nerf, is still pretty good. The Sturm S has its multi-role capability, even though it's pretty poor. And the 775 is looking pretty fun as well. It even has like a rocket-assisted HE, so similar to the Accra, which would be quite fun to use. Tell you one thing I would love on this thing, though, just like a lot of the vehicles, and something that really helped out with the Object 435, surprisingly enough, some kind of top-mounted gun. Like, this vehicle is going to get targeted a lot by CAS because it just can't do anything against them. And at this BR, when CAS really becomes incredibly rampant, it won't be able to deal with them in any way. And that engine block doesn't have a lot of armor on the top of it. So for me, it would be nice if the vehicle had a little bit of something on the top of it, like a pintle mount, to just try and help it out. But then again, that's like a lot of vehicles in the game, so I suppose it's not too different. I am really looking forward to playing this one because it will have a unique playstyle. It will play a lot different to many of the other vehicles in the game. And even though that means it may be situational, I'm sure it has many more situations than most ATGM carriers to be useful in. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Juan the Panda, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Bareen, Peter Grayling, Alan Hacker, Sem Alslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R., and also Lafouche for supporting the channel.